Welcome to the Tough Decisions Network for Entrepreneurs. I'm Dan Handford, and my wife, Dennae, and I interview successful people sharing stories behind tough decisions that they've had to make along their journey as an entrepreneur.
On the podcast with us today is Anupam Satyasheel, and welcome. We're looking forward to talking with you.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to this too.
Anupam, I want you to get us started and talk to us a little bit about your background as an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. So I was an investment banker on Wall Street from 2005 till 2011. And for those of us who know the recent financial history, there was for sure fun times. We went through some of the toughest financial crisis in the history of modern USA. And fortunately for me, things were coming back by the time I got disillusioned with the banking system. And I said, okay, let me go start something of my own. So that's how I started a boutique investment bank called Occams Advisory. That went on pretty well for a little over 3 years, at which time I felt that the biggest impediment in the path of the growth was a lack of more predictable cash flow. Investment bankers don't make so much money unless they close deals. That's boutique banks. The large bankers, of course, they get base salaries, which I was not making for myself. So with an attempt to diversify our cash flows and lower the risk of the business, we got into payment services and tax advisory. Over the course of last 2 years, we also have added some personal finance business, including insurance. So that's the brief history of Occams Group, which I am the founder and CEO of.
Great. Well, I'm sure along this entire process that you've had some tough decisions that you have faced along the way. And I want you to get us started by talking to us about a tough decision that you had to make that did not have that good of an outcome, but you learned a lot of lessons through it.
Yes. I have to take a step back and talk about how focused I was on setting the companies up for growth when it started. So even though it was just one employee to begin with, and then we had 3 or 4 or 5 in the first 2 or 3 years, I took time to write out the policies, to define the do's and don'ts, and have clear-cut guidelines like titles, structures, how do we pay people, what we allow, what we don't allow. I knew that when we grow, we won't have time for that. And that's what exactly happened. One of our clear guidelines was that anybody and everybody who gets hired in the company, they have to earn their job. They don't get hired because of knowing someone or any of those things. I'm not saying that people do that. I'm just saying that I was very clear that we will not do that. Unfortunately or fortunately, depends on how I look at that. It happened in end of 2016, beginning 2017. One of my good friends, he was a retail banker. I had known him for a while. He lost his job and he approached me that, hey, can I work with you? Now, this was the beginning of the tough decision that I could see that the person could add value, but I just could not see a scenario in which I was going to put him through the formal recruiting process and he was going to get a job. So I knew he had a family, he had a baby coming and all those things. So finally, I kind of maneuvered my own conscience and judgment and said, okay, come work with us. We'll see what you do, but here is a salary, here's a title, here's an offer letter, come start working with us. And in hindsight, I know it was not the best decision to make. As they say, if you make a rule, don't break it. Or if you intend to break it, then don't make the rule to begin with. So I had made a rule for the company, which I broke. This didn't work out so well. But the core point is that it was a tough decision in the making that, do you go with the specific guidelines? Do you be a good friend, which you always wanted to be? So emotionally taxing when you're trying to think of yourself as a good professional and as a good friend. There was no middle path. And I took one side, which didn't work out, of course.
Well, I want to dive into this a little bit because I think this is worthy of discussion a little bit deeper because, we've been, in our own, position of having companies that we have started and, we have multiple clinics that we've started here in South Carolina. We have 5 non-surgical orthopedic medical clinics that my wife and I own 100% of. And in these clinics, as we started to scale, doing that was very hard. Trying to hire somebody and then kind of allow them to work their way up to a management position was hard because, you're starting to open up a clinic that's an hour and a half away and you can't have them just be over there without a manager, right? And so how would you say, or what do you do when you're trying to put somebody in a position that you really need somebody there and you need somebody, but you don't have somebody that you can promote into it?
I think I get your question only partly. With regard to the challenge which I had, it was not about giving him a position. It was giving him any position.
So what do you do differently when you hire people? You have your rule, but what do you do to implement that rule?
Great question. So what we have is that we have a job description written out for what we want to hire for. And if somebody who we know socially or professionally wants to be considered for that role, then they formally apply. We have the human capital screening, then we have the manager interview them. And till date, every single person who gets hired in this company, I interview them. So I do the last interview and then they get hired. In this instance, we did not do any of those. There was no JD written. There was no application made. There was no HR screening. I simply said, okay, come and work with us, because I knew two things. A, if I put him through the process, he will not get that job. And then was going to become even tougher for me to go out and roll out an offer letter. If you're breaking a rule, you want to do it quietly. You don't announce to the whole world, hey, I'm running a traffic light. And like, your people just do it quietly. So I quietly broke the rule, rather sheepishly, but I quietly broke the rule. And then, of course, I faced the consequences.
So I get what you're trying to say now. So basically, you have these systems and procedures that you've put into place in your business, and one of them was the hiring process. And because you had a connection with this person, you decided to forego or break that rule. And at the end of the day, it came back to bite you.
Yes, it did.
Well, let's shift a little bit here and talk about a different tough decision that you've had to make as an entrepreneur that had a really good and positive outcome and some of those lessons.
Sure thing. So I touched upon that briefly. I was an investment banker in New York City. And for those of you who have dealt with them, and for those of you who have not, you all know they come with their set of entitlements, right? They are the masters of universe. They are the people who get the big dollars. They have swanky offices, best suits, the whole shebang. So when I started my own business, it went off pretty all right. It's not that we were not doing business, we weren't making money. We were not doing enough of it to grow. To get a little specific, we have to have people who can execute business. I was good at getting business, but I could not execute everything and obviously manage clients too. So we had to recruit staff and we had to pay them base salaries. We don't work only for contingent payment. Unfortunately, as a boutique investment bank, you don't end up getting retainers pretty often. You mostly rely on success-based fee. So if somebody buys a business, then the seller pays you a nice commission or closing fee. And likewise, whatever you retain for, you get paid success-based fee. So lack of stable, predictable cash flow was turning out to be an impediment in the growth of the business in general. So after about 6 months of very clear thinking, I came to the conclusion that we have to diversify into more predictable businesses. Now, there came the big ego that, I'm an investment banker. I'm not going to run a tax advisory business, or I'm not going to run payment services business, which are not as elite, so to say. So it was a tough decision, more about my own professional preferences and what I'm willing to do to push my ambition. Ultimately, through thinking, became clear to me, through thinking as well as discussions with my mentors and people I respect, that as an entrepreneur, there's nothing called anything below your level. You got to do what you got to do to build a business. And if you can't do that, if you really cannot sweep the floor and split your meal with your employees because you can't afford meals for everyone, you really cannot grow a business. You really have to eat the humble pie, so to say. So I went down that path, and it took some swallowing of pride. I went back to my previous employer from before banking days, and asked them for work, and they were kind enough. They gave me work, and that actually was a 10-month contract, which helped us a lot with cash flows. And that was the beginning of a whole new stability, which allowed us to grow across verticals. And we were able to do things like be an Inc. 500 company for 3 straight years and other good things. So it was a tough decision in terms of, is this something which I'm willing to, I shouldn't say get down to, but kind of compromise my level down to. And then I took that decision. In hindsight, I'm very happy I did that, because in absence of that, we could not have grown as much as we have.
Yeah, I think that's really important to understand, that when you're putting somebody in a position, you should really understand what they do. And I'm a big believer in learning to do those tasks alongside that person, or even before that person even gets put into that position, because it allows you to relate to them, but it also allows you to jump in there just in case something happens to that person as well. And it should not be beneath you to sweep the floors or plumb the toilets, or whatever the case may be. And I'm the same way.
It's great to say that, because I actually come from a very humble background. However, when you go through a certain make-believe world for 6-7 years when you're dealing with people who all have egos as big as whatever it gets, and then they have certain standards, quote unquote, that you want to maintain. And in hindsight, I feel that it was more of that peer pressure which was preventing me, not my own conviction that this is below. I always believed in dignity of labor. But in that time, I was like, what do I go and tell my friends and professional contacts? I have a what business? A tax business. And I was a banker earlier. So kind of people end up being snooty. And I'm glad I was able to get rid of that feeling and get down to real floor and get stuff done.
Anupam, can you tell us a little bit about the decision-making process or the strategies that you like to use when you are facing a tough decision?
My first instinct, if I really feel that this is not an easy one, is to say, okay, let's pause. Let's not make a decision right now. That itself is in a big contrast to my decision-making policy. I'm a big believer in what Napoleon Hill said or Dale Carnegie said in those famous books like, Think and Grow Rich and all those fun books. Effective leaders make a decision quickly, very quickly, and they almost never reverse it. So when I feel that I can't decide quickly, I just pause it. So that's the first thing I do. And then I know that I have some work to do. So I use the time from then till the next time I can actually brood over this. It helps me a lot if I sleep with a problem, literally, like if I go to bed thinking about that, requesting my subconscious mind to give me some kind of guidance. And then again, if I remember, think about it when I wake up, when my thinking is not fully alert, like I haven't had my coffee, I haven't woken up, or like little, dazed or like, hazy, and I don't get to sleep many hours. So I'm mostly like that when I wake up. So when you are not fully alert and you can't think fully rationally, then your subconscious kicks in. So I use those timings to think as to what I will do. Now, if I don't get any breakthrough at this point, then I know that I have to actually go to other people. So I go to either my board or I go to my mentors or ask my wife or ask people who I believe have some insight into it. Again, depends on what the problem is. And fortunately for me, I have a good number of people I can go to. And between all this inward thinking and outward asking, I'm usually able to get to some more clarity. More and more, I try to avoid taking a decision on my own if I feel that I don't have all the information to make a decision. To conclude, I would say that decision-making is part intuition, part science, and I've tried to take it as much towards science as possible while honoring my intuition. I don't want to not honor my intuition, but I want to put through a framework that, it also meets the test of a framework.
We are going to take a quick break and hear from one of our show sponsors. When we come back, we're going to talk to Anupam about some of his favorites as it relates to his life as an entrepreneur.
Have you ever thought about investing in real estate, but find yourself so busy that you don't have time for it? Do you have FOMO, which is the fear of missing out? At HanfordCapital.com, we help investors with passive real estate investments that project better returns than traditional investment vehicles such as the stock market. If you'd like to find out more about our passive real estate investments, visit HanfordCapital.com. That's HANDFORD Capital.com. We will jump on a call with you to discuss your investment goals and to see if our investments are a good fit for you. This advertisement is not to be construed as an offer or recommendation to buy or sell a security. Visit HanfordCapital.com. And we are back, and I want to go through a series of quick questions and answers with you, Anupam, that is called the trifecta. I want you to get us started by talking to us about your favorite technology that you like to use in business that helps make your life easier every day as an entrepreneur.
You asked me to pick one favorite.
I know there's a lot of them out there, and I use a ton of them. And if you want to list maybe 2 or 3 that are your top picks, then we could do that too.
As I mentioned in the beginning, even when we're a small company, I try to put all the systems in place. So we have 4 or 5 designated things to use. Like we use Teamwork for our project management. We use G Suite, the Google Suite, for emails and calendars and things like that. Likewise, we have designated accounting programs. Surprise, it's QuickBooks. We have designated conference calling programs, a GoToMeeting and all that. So it's pretty streamlined. We use Velocity as our payroll company. So we have tried to pick top 2 or 3 options available and insist that people use it consistently. We have either iPhone or Samsung Galaxy as the default smartphone for people. And we insist on people using laptops and not desktop computers. We try to be tech savvy and leverage technology to be more effective.
What is a favorite quote that you've heard that has helped you as an entrepreneur?
If you restrict me to one, I would say it's by Teddy Roosevelt. It's not necessarily verbatim, but in a sense, when he says that the credit goes to the guy in the ring and not the armchair critic, the person who actually is in the ring, who is bruised and bloodied and who is taking off all the blows. That's something which I always get inspired by when it's like a little challenging. I'm like, you know what? There's no glory in sitting in the spectator chair and cheering and or hooting. It's actually is being in the ring and fighting it out. So that is something which always reassures me.
And what is one favorite book that you have read that helps you make better decisions as an entrepreneur?
That's a tough ask. I read about a book a week. So if narrow down to one book.
Or maybe what book are you reading this week?
I'm reading a book called The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. Right before that, I was reading Think and Grow Rich, but I read 3 or 4 books parallelly. So I would say if I have to narrow down to 2 books, I would say one definitely is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Those 7 timeless principles are always useful when you're trying to make decisions. And the second book I would say, which always I find useful, is a book called Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. Not sure if you've read that, but it highlights the importance of empowering yourself as a necessary tool to empower anybody else. So when you have to make a decision or when you have to think of a framework, one has to think that you cannot compromise the golden goose. The golden goose has to survive for anyone to survive. So I rely on those 2 books pretty heavily.
What's the next thing for you right now on your vision or dream board?
We started off with the vision to be a full-service financial services business serving lower middle market, small and middle-sized businesses. We continue to do that. We now have investment bank, we have payment services, we have insurance and financial advisory. We just bought a company end of last year, which helps us with personal finance, more so for people who have financial problems. And we need to add a couple of things like retail bank, which is pretty far on the horizon. But that's consolidate this, make it bigger, get a national footprint and global footprint. There's a lot of work ahead of me.
I want you to kind of wrap it up here and tell us a little bit about how can we contact you or reach out to you or follow you more after this interview.
I am much less active on Twitter or LinkedIn or any of those social media than I would like to be. Not my preference, but it's just you constantly have to prioritize. And I also have 2 young kids, 4 and 2-year-old boys, and trying to be a responsible father also takes away time. Emailing me is the best option. I always get to my emails, if not soon, then late, but I always get to them. If you go to our company website, info@occamsadvisory.com, if you send anything there, it finds its way to me if it's for me, and it always does. And I always respond to it if it's actually something which is for me. Again, it's not something is in it for me. It's something which, if someone asks me a question, I always respond to it, whether it's in a conversation or anything else. Before I wrap up, I really want to thank you guys for your patience. I know that I had to go through 2 reschedulings, not my preferred way of doing things, but I'm very happy that we finally got to speak.
No, I really appreciate you taking the time and being with us here. And, we're looking forward to continuing to following you as you continue to grow and expand and have you on a future episode as you continue to grow as an entrepreneur as well.
Thank you so much. I look forward to that.
Thank you for listening to the Tough Decisions Network. Be sure to visit toughdecisions.net to gain access to show notes for this episode and to join our free weekly entrepreneur email where we will send you news about the latest technology for your business, inspiring quotes, and the latest books for entrepreneurs. That's toughdecisions.net.